I don't believe she actually went through with it. After all, she went public. It was the sentence that shook the Brown family and the internet. Christine had gone and done the unthinkable. She had penned a book, one that bared secrets, intimate moments, and truths that Kody never thought would leave the walls of their house. And when the news came out, the response was immediate: shock, indignation, and an urge to know more that swept fans around the globe. But why would the shy, overlooked wife Christine make such a dramatic move? What would compel her to expose family secrets that could transform everything? And most importantly, how would Kody, the man who so carefully managed his public persona, respond to having his private life exposed for all to witness? This wasn't simply a tale about a book, it was a tale of trusts broken, egos dented, and a family hovering at the brink of chaos. For years, Christine had lived in Kody's shadow, her voice frequently being drowned out as decisions regarding their lives were made by him in her absence. On television, she smiled, laughed, and looked happy, but behind the glib episodes, there raged a silent tempest. She had sat and watched her thoughts ignored, her emotions downplayed, and her contributions undone. The Brown family, in the eyes of the world, appeared solid and in accord, but Christine was aware of the fissures that no lens could film. The tension of unsaid irritations had been building over years, like a pressure cooker sitting in wait for the perfect opportunity to explode. Late at night, when the house was finally quiet and the rest of the world braked, Christine would turn inward. She thought about years of faithfulness, sacrifices, and the quiet betrayals that had eroded her sense of self. With each memory she recollected, there was another layer of her narrative that had never been revealed. A narrative of stamina and resilience that had gone unnoticed by anyone, even by those surrounding her. In the private moments, she started recording her experiences, tiny details that picked up on emotions, diary entries that delivered the truth of her narrative, and accounts of the family dynamics that had made her feel invisible. It wasn't revenge, it was taking back her voice. And finally, she let herself consider what it would be like to be heard. Each sentence she wrote was a thread, stitching together the life she had led in silence and patience with the life she now saw for herself, where her own story counted, where her point of view could no longer be dismissed. As she worked through these ideas, Christine's determination increased. She knew that eventually, the stories that had been silenced for so long would have to come out into the daylight. The challenge was daunting. How could she tell her truth without blowing up the delicate equilibrium of the family she still loved? And yet, a quiet conviction slowly crept into her. The moment had arrived to come out of the shadows and at last share the tale that had been hers to tell all along. In that silence, a strategy began to take shape, one that would trigger a chain of events no one, not even Kody, could have foreseen. The choice to make herself known was not taken lightly. Christine had taken months to balance the repercussions, to picture every scenario, and yet the urge to say her truth was irresistible. She started writing a book secretly, choosing what to write, what not to write, and how to present her experiences. Each chapter became a mirror of her existence, true, candid, and real. She took photos of agony, frustration, and small triumphs, documenting a portrait no one outside her realm had ever had a glimpse of. As she wrote, Christine experienced a combination of fear and freedom. The fear was legitimate, of retaliation, of judgment, of creating ripples that would never subside. But the freedom was even greater, one she hadn't experienced in years. Every word on the page reminded her that she had a voice, a view, and a story that counted. She chronicled the struggles, the sacrifices, the emotional labor that had been long unseen, and the slight betrayals that clung like shadows in the corners of her existence. It was a delicate dance of honesty and strategy, weighing how much to reveal, in order to be truthful without exposing the pieces of her life she wasn't ready to share. Christine was aware that when the book came out, everything would be different. The family that she cared for, the man she had wedded, the children she cherished, everything about them would be different in ways she could not even imagine. And yet, an inner resolve drove her. This wasn't about one-sided complaining or stirring up drama. It was about reclaiming who she was, and taking back control of a story that had been told by someone else for so long. Every day, she wrote more into her manuscript, recalling memories with acuity she hadn't previously possessed. She wrote about the tiny human things, the sighs, the looks, the silences that were more potent than words. She chronicled the heaviness of late-night conversations that ran nowhere, the emotional labor that never found its way onto the cameras, and the private moments when she felt loneliest in a house full of people. And so, at last the manuscript was finished. Christine clutched it in her hand, a real testament to years of deliberation, bravery, and passive rebellion. She understood the next move would put it all in motion. The day the book hit the public, the moment the world heard her version of things, and the moment Kody would know that the private fences he had constructed around his life could no longer hold the truth. The storm before the calm was past, and in its waiting time, Christine realized something deep inside her. The tale she had held close to her chest for all these years was now ready to be revealed. When the book came out, the world did freeze for a moment. Christine's narrative was no longer locked within secrecy journals or confessed whispers. It was now out in the open, palpable and indisputable. Headlines flashed across screens. Social media was filled with arguments, and fans consumed each jaw-dropping revelation. Each paragraph, each recollection she shared, was akin to a slap hurled straight into Kody's deliberately built world. His private life that he had guarded so zealously was now open for all to see, and the responses were instantaneous. Kody's initial experience of the book was one of shock and rage. He had anticipated scandals, gossip, even leaks, but not a meticulously recorded history of his life, exposed for all to read. With each turn of the page, the paper seemed to smolder with inner heat, each disclosure eroding his clinically constructed persona. His normally rigid face betrayed flickers of astonishment, bewilderment, and rage. He couldn't conceal it. Every fiber of his essence was shaken, and the fissures in the veneer impossible to hide. Christine observed from afar, a peculiar mix of fear and empowerment creeping over her. The public's reactions, the rumors on the internet, the excitement and outrage, these were all part of the drama that unfolded. She had braced herself for resistance, backlash, even damage control attempts. But she had also expected the satisfaction of being heard at last. And in that odd combination of chaos and publicity, she felt a secret sense of victory, a validation that her voice had always deserved to be heard. The family was not so fortunate. Some of the wives were shocked, not knowing quite how to react. Others quietly comprehended why Christine had needed to share her tale. The children likewise gazed with fascination and fear, realizing that their world, which had been personal and intimate, was now public property. The home buzzed with tension, each look and movement charged with new significance, as the unseen strands that had united them started to unravel under the strain of this disclosure. And if you believed that the first shock was the worst of it, the real drama had only just started. Each media interview, each blog post, each chat became another brushstroke in a painting that seemed to grow darker with every hour. Christine had set a fire that no one could tame, and Kody found himself frantically trying to take back control, all while discovering that control had perhaps been an illusion from the start. The stage was being set, the players moving into place, and the tale of Christine's book, and Kody's bruised ego, only just beginning. And in that electric stillness, one question hung in the air, unasked but impossible to avoid. How would the family ride out the storm that Christine had brought into their lives? Kody's response to the book was more than anyone had expected. Initially there was shocked silence, a thick tension that rested in the room like a fog. Each meticulously crafted image of control, each public person he had created through the years, seemed to topple with every sentence Christine had penned. The man who had long stood as the solid pillar of the family now stood caught, exposed and woefully unready for the tempest his wife had unleashed. The ego that once projected authority now struggled under scrutiny. Every public appearance, every interview, became a delicate dance between composure and frustration. Kody faced questions he couldn't easily answer, accusations he couldn't easily dismiss, and a public that seemed more fascinated than sympathetic. And while he grappled with his own humiliation, Christine remained steady, almost serene. She had expected the disorder, even welcomed it, and in so doing had altered the power dynamic in a manner no one could have anticipated. Within the home, tension seethed like an underground river. The other wives observed in silence, some with sympathy, others with trepidation, attempting to tread that fine line between allegiance and survival. Speeches grew guarded, eyes pierced with hidden queries, and even the children picked up on the new beat that the atmosphere of their formerly comfortable world was undergoing. Each corridor, each communal meal, bore the unseen burden of Christine's discovery. Christine herself, though, was not shaken. The publication of the book had done more than reveal secrets. It had provided her with a new strength, assurance that her experience counted, and that her voice could not be silenced. She navigated the public glare with an unlooked-for serenity, a testament to the fortitude she had found in the months of solitary writing. Her narrative had become a power, one that opposed the well-crafted histories of the past, and called to be seen. And yet, the tension was only just beginning. Kody's battle with pride and perception was only just unfolding, as was the ripple effect on their family and in the media. Every day brought new obstacles, new discussions, and new confrontations that compelled them all to face unpleasant truths. It was a watershed moment, one at which the dynamics of power, long assumed, had shifted irreparably. In that charged environment, the question hung in the air like a shadow over each encounter. How would the family adapt, survive, and redefine itself, following a revelation no one could disregard? The responses were unclear, and the repercussions were just starting to become apparent. Christine had made the first fearless step, and now the entire family would have to ride out the tempest she had unleashed. The first few days after the publication of the book were nothing less than tumultuous. Each look, each utterance, each encounter brought a new burden. Kody, who had previously been the unchallenged leader of the household, now found himself scrutinized by both the outside world and the family he had long attempted to guide. The well-rehearsed persona that had been built up over years started to fracture in ways that could not be mended overnight. Every new headline, every viral tweet, reminded him that the private life he had maintained was now public. Within the house, tension hung in the air. Conversations were guarded, looks filled with unstated questions, and even the smallest movements seemed amplified under the strain. The other wives, each with their own opinions, grappled with the fluid dynamics of loyalty, compassion, and curiosity. Some quietly admired Christine's courage, recognizing a strength they hadn't seen openly displayed before. Others wrestled with unease, unsure how to respond to a revelation that had disrupted the family's equilibrium so profoundly. Christine, however, moved with a newfound confidence. The act of telling her story had not only given her voice, it had given her agency. For the first time in years, she saw that her opinion counted, that her life was being noticed and recognized outside the confines of the family compound. The sense of empowerment she derived from this visibility was a direct contrast to Kody's escalating discomfort. It was a delicate near-Hollywood reversal, one that played on the conflict between public image and behind-the-scenes reality. And if you thought the family's battle was over, the whirlwind had just started. Each day introduced new ripples, online arguments, media attention, and fan conversations that analyzed every new finding. Kody's efforts to wrest back control of the narrative were usually unsuccessful, while Christine's deliberate, calm demeanor only cemented her place in the spotlight. What had started as a personal act of expression had become a catalyst for an unprecedented shift in the family's dynamic. In quiet moments, the gravity of the situation settled in. The children sensed it too, their curiosity and concern mingling in ways that highlighted just how much the household had changed. And during those times of contemplation, the implicit question hung in the air: would trust ever be regained? Or had Christine's disclosures forever changed the trajectory of their family? The response was unclear, but this much was certain: family life at the Browns' home would never again be the same. As the media hype kept growing, the Brown family was moving into unfamiliar territory. Each interview, each tweet, each fan comment became a reminder that their personal lives were no longer personal. Kody in particular felt the pressure building. The man who had long taken pride in keeping himself under control and composed now wrestled with keeping the tidal waves of attention from engulfing him. The public, goaded by Christine's disclosures, appeared rapacious, hungry to analyze each utterance, each movement, each suggestion of strain in the family. Christine's own part in the drama as it unfolded became increasingly defined. Whenever she emerged into public view or participated in interviews gleaned from her book, she radiated a contained strength that was in direct contrast to Kody's evident discomfort. She had moved into a light she had been denied for so long, and in doing so she upset the power dynamic that had ruled their house for years. Her bravery was a declaration to her family as well as the world. Her experiences counted, and her voice would not be silenced. Within the household, the air was charged with unspoken questions. The other wives watched warily, managing their own feelings while attempting to comfort the children amid the sudden tumult. Every moment was freighted with 1,000 things to consider: how to react, what to say, and how to create some semblance of stability in a household that now seemed both vulnerable and volatile. Even simple things, a family dinner, a discussion in the living room, were laced with tension, as if the whole history of the family had been rewritten under the bright lights of media scrutiny. And through it all, Christine's commitment did not waver. She had risked everything that could be conceived, and yet, the act of revealing her truth was empowering. The book was not just pages glued together, it was a declaration of agency, a reminder that for far too long, her experiences had remained invisible. The change was unmistakable. Christine's story had altered the narrative, disrupting assumptions, expectations, and the diligently preserved facade of the Brown family. But even as Christine recovered, the issue of reconciliation remained. Would Kody find reconciliation with the new reality of another family whose story had been altered? Could marriage's trust, parents' and children's trust, endure this cataclysmic shift? And as the world waited, holding its breath for the next bombshell, tension within the family hung unresolved, a precarious balance on the brink of shift. In that tense stillness, one thing was unmistakably clear: the moment of speaking out had altered everything, and there was no going back. The Brown family would never again settle into the quiet balance of the past, and the price of Christine's bravery was only just beginning to reveal itself. The psychological impact of the book's release was a maelstrom of publicity, speculation, and sentiment. Christine had expected backlash, but the actual fallout was much larger than she had envisioned. Headlines splashed her disclosures onto screens around the globe. Social media crackled with arguments, and readers analyzed each sentence of the book with zeal. Everyone was watching, and Christine finally realized the enormity of what she had done, not out of fear, but as proof of her bravery. Kody, however, could not keep himself calm. Each reference to the book was like a personal blow, each headline a reminder of the fissures in the carefully constructed life he had lived. Pride, frustration, and a sense of betrayal battled within him, producing tension that could not be concealed. He knew that no public utterance, no thoughtful interview, could ever capture the power of what Christine had released. The well-honed script he had depended upon for so long was evaporating from his hands. Within the household, the atmosphere was almost charged. The other wives observed, some silently understanding Christine's desire to be heard, others struggling with uncertainty and fear of how the family unit would shift. The children, perceptive and sensitive, felt it too: the unseen burden of compromised allegiances and revealed secrets. The home, once a refuge, now seemed like a backdrop for a play no one had entirely seen coming. And still, Christine's confidence only increased. The process of sharing her story had empowered her in ways that went far beyond the bounds of her book. She navigated the scrutiny with steady resolve, well attuned to the power that her words had unleashed. What was initially a private catharsis had now become a public proclamation, not just against Kody's reputation, but also against the perceptions of the audience, who had long observed the Brown clan with filtered vision. The question hung over everything, heavy and unshakable: could Kody learn to adjust to this new world? Could the family come to terms with the unspoken realities now exposed? Each encounter, each look, hung in the balance of confrontation, of discovery, or of insight. The not knowing was all around, but tension generated a strange clarity, too. Nothing would ever be the same again, and each decision from here on had consequence. In those silent, introspective moments, there was one thought that was unavoidable: Christine's strength had made everything possible for a change. The story she had been holding on to for years was finally in the world's hands, and the family, as well as Kody's pride, would have to weather the tempest that was already underway. What would happen next was anyone's guess. But one thing was for sure. The dynamics of the Brown family would never be the same again. As the media storm raged on, the Brown family lived under a microscope. Every facet of their day-to-day life, every look, every movement, every word uttered, was now open to public scrutiny. Kody, who had always depended on control and methodical presentation, felt the control slipping away from him. The world was no longer observing the family he had so methodically constructed. They were watching the narrative Christine had elected to present unvarnished and uncensored. Every revelation that came from the book was a mirror reflecting his vulnerabilities, causing him to deal with feelings he had maintained for a long time under lock and key. Christine, on the other hand, appeared to glide by an almost immovable tranquility. The book, now a public declaration of her existence and her voice, had evolved from a personal act of expression. Her bravery captivated media and fans as equally as did her calm demeanor, which contrasted starkly with the tempest brewing around Kody. There was no fear in her eyes, only clarity, a realization that sharing her tale had been the opening step towards claiming a piece of herself that had long remained silenced. In the home of the family, tension brewed like an unsaid storm. The other wives watched guardedly, each dealing with her own emotions while attempting to provide stability for the children. Talk was guarded, eyes were weighted, and even the slightest communication was burdened with fresh meaning. The kids felt it too. What had been every day before now felt pregnant with meaning, and even gestures of play or passing chat were suspended on the undertow of a world now larger than the limits of their house. And if you believe that Christine's disclosures had spent their power, the tale was hardly done. Every public outing, every media reference, only served to further intensify the ripple effect. Kody's efforts at exercising control became ever more tenuous, and Christine's voice became ever stronger, more confident, and more heard. The equilibrium that had governed their family for decades had tipped, and the fallout was just beginning to coalesce. In quiet moments, the gravity of the situation condescended. Christine's bravery had not only uncovered secret realities, but had also brought the family face to face with realities they had kept hidden for so long. Kody's ego, once so unbreakable, now was tested in ways that questioned not only his dominance, but also his understanding of himself. And as the world looked on, the Brown family stood at the crossroads, with each decision from this point forward having unprecedented significance. The question hanging in the air, impossible to disregard, was basic but deep. How would the family be able to move forward in a future irreparably altered by a narrative no longer able to be suppressed? Christine had jumped, and now the way forward was unclear, full of tension, and filled with potential none of them had been able to anticipate. The days immediately after the book came out melted into a blur of scrutiny, contention, and introspection. Christine's disclosures had sparked more than discussion. They had put the family on high alert, making each member question the roles they had so long assumed. Kody, previously the unexamined hub of power, now responded instead of directed, his ego dented and his equanimity strained in every direction. Public outings turned into minefields, and every question from the press or supporters seemed like another notice that his well-laid-out story was unraveling before him. Christine, to be sure, appeared to ride out the storm with a surprise equilibrium. Having verbalized her truth, something in her had changed. Gone were the days of being invisible and ignored. Now she had a quiet authority that stood in dramatic contrast to Kody's publicly displayed discomfort. Each interview she granted, each measured encounter with the public, seemed to reinforce her resilience, even as Kody fought to reassert a sense of mastery that continued to slip further from his grasp with each succeeding day. Within the home, tension seethed like an unspoken undertow. The other wives attempted to walk the shifting tides, balancing compassion for Christine against the demands of their own feelings. Children watched the unspoken divisions with an intuitive intelligence, noticing the tension within the adults that surrounded them. Even the mundane routines, dinner with the family, casual chatter, or spending time together, were tainted with the weight of the disruption. each minor gesture infused with meaning that had always before gone unnoticed. And if you believe the tension had built to its ultimate level, the ripple effects were only just starting. The public interest in the story kindled further examination. Social media chatter intensified. Arguments about loyalty and treachery dominated comment streams, and each mention in the media built further on the scale of Christine's influence. Kody, used to being the overall figure of power and respect, was now confronted with a world where he was not only being judged by his behavior, but by what he truly was as a person. Christine, on the other hand, appeared to get clearer with each moment that passed. Bravery it had to tell her own story turned out to be something empowering, a validation that what she had gone through counted and needed to be heard. She had altered the story not only for herself but for the whole family, defying assumptions and presenting a confrontation of truths that had been buried for years. And in the still moments, when the storm dissipated for a momentary breath, one question hung in the air: would the family ride out this tempest, or had Christine's confidences changed their lives forever? The response was not forthcoming, and each moment, each look, each sentence bore the weight of a still unfinished story, a story that had altered everything. The pressure was mounting for Kody with the passing weeks. Every public reference to Christine's book was a nagging beam of light on his imperfections, and every interview, every headline seemed to grow the hairline fractures in the highly polished image he had built over the years. He had always been the rock of the family, the man whose voice defined stories at home and in the public eye. And now, that anchor appeared to totter under the burden of facts he could no longer contain. Christine, in the meanwhile, had become a silent force. The act of telling her story had changed more than public opinion. It had changed the dynamics within the family. Her quiet confidence, her poised demeanor, and the assertiveness with which she relayed her truth presented a strong contrast to Kody's increasing unease. The public, mesmerized by the drama that was unfolding, watched in rapt attention as the power balance changed subtly but unmistakably. Within the home, there was tension. Conversations were heavy with calculation, looks loaded with hidden meaning, and even mundane interactions loaded with significance. The other wives treaded these new realities carefully, some providing subtle encouragement to Christine, others attempting to keep the balance within a home now defined by secrets and responses. The kids, sensing the change, appeared to feel the undercurrent tension, their own universe suddenly bigger and more complex than it had been mere weeks earlier. And yet, Christine stood firm. The bravery to open her mouth, to reveal the secrets she had kept hidden for so long, had imparted an unforeseen strength, a means by which she could regain control of her own tale. Each interview, each outing, strengthened the hold she now possessed. Kody, previously invincible in his grip on the family narrative, found himself responding to the very things he had never dared consider would find their way into the public sphere. And if you believed the effect was superficial, the tale was far from finished. Kody's battle with ego, image, and pride started to manifest in subtle but significant ways. Tense interactions, glimpses of overt frustration, and efforts at asserting authority that failed to have the desired effect. And Christine's serene demeanor only served to underscore the disparity, revealing a fresh depth of strength that had been lying in wait for what felt like an eternity. In the still, contemplative spaces between turmoil, one question lingered, suspended over all interaction, all look, all choice: would the Brown family weather the tempest that Christine had unleashed, or had her disclosures irretrievably altered everything? The response was unclear, the suspense unrelieved, and the tale, replete with betrayal, courage, and metamorphosis, kept unfolding day by day. As weeks passed, the aftershocks of Christine's book became inescapable. The tale she had so bravely recounted was no longer confined to books. It had overflowed into every aspect of the Brown household. Kody, who had been the undisputed master of control, was now faced not only with outside criticism, but with the subtle, painful realization that his grip on the story was gone. Every headline, every tweet, every hushed rumor reminded him that the world, and his own family members, were judging a version of him he could no longer control. Christine, on the other hand, navigated the storm with increasing clarity and power. The process of revealing her truth had unleashed something in her. A realization that what she went through mattered, that her voice could not be silenced. Every public sighting, every encounter with the fans, and even the silent nods of encouragement from some of the other wives, reminded her that she had entered a place she had long been excluded from. Her bravery, once hidden and secret, now lay open, irrevocable and transmutive. Within the family house, tension mounted, discussions once free-flowing now had a subtext of calculation. Glimpses were exchanged, heavy with significance, as each domestic encounter turned into a miniature reflection of the general turmoil. The children were observant and sensitive, feeling the tiny changes, observing closely as parents and siblings moved through a world that had turned instantly volatile. The balance of the family had been altered, and even mundane routines now took on the tension of the secrets that had shattered their worlds. And if you thought the tension was at its highest point, the truth was much more complex. Kody not only wrestled with his public persona, but with his internal reaction, ego dented, pride hurt, and authority undermined in ways he never imagined. While Christine's quiet assurance continued to build, the bravery that had taken to open up her tale had become an expression of strength that was nearly tangible, an energy that had resonated throughout both the family and public eye. During quiet moments, the seriousness of the situation could no longer be denied. Christine had ignited change, compelling not only Kody but the entire family to face uncomfortable realities. The family, once held together by habit and image, now lived in tension and reassessment. Every choice, every encounter, had a burden that could no longer be overlooked. And the family had to chart a future forged as much by discovery as by love, commitment, and strength. In that tense silence, one lasting question hung in the air: could the Brown family really accept the truths that Christine had revealed? Or had her courage irreversibly changed the course of their lives? The response was unclear, leaving each observer and each family member locked in a place of expectation, holding their breath to await what next happened. The effect of Christine's book continued to resonate, well beyond what anyone could have expected. Public fascination showed no signs of fading, and the Brown family found themselves navigating a new reality every single day. Kody, whose identity had long been intertwined with control and perception, now faced the uncomfortable truth that his influence over both the family and the public narrative had been fundamentally challenged. The image he had so assiduously preserved for so long was shattered, and each encounter reminded him that nothing would ever be the same as before. Christine, however, appeared virtually unscathed by the turmoil that had engulfed her. Her voice, once muted and repressed, had become a public instrument. With every interview, every conversation, and every polite nod from fans and allies, her confidence increased. The bravery it had taken to share her truth had evolved into an unshakable presence, a reminder that authenticity has a power and gravity that no one can help but notice. She walked with quiet purpose, a quiet confidence that underscored the dynamic change within family, and underscored the difference between her empowerment and Kody's mounting desperation. In the home, tension was ever present. The other wives managed their own feelings, playing off sympathy for Christine against the reality of an altered family environment. Words were guarded, eyes communicated silently, and even simple routines were infused with the hint of unexpressed questions. The children, never insensitive, intuited the change. Their universe, once predictable and cushioned by appearances, now lived in a sphere where discoveries had forever changed the way they knew adults. And if you believed the drama peaked, the emotional tension was far from over. Kody's battle was internal and external, a battle of ego, authority, and public opinion. Every effort to regain control or composure was answered with subtle opposition, occasionally unspoken, occasionally voiced publicly, as a reminder that power in the family had shifted irretrievably. Christine's confidence, poise, and clarity of thought were the standards against which Kody's reactions were measured, both by the family itself and by the viewers who witnessed it all from the outside. In times of quiet, the magnitude of what had been accomplished became inescapable. Christine's courage had compelled the family to confront realities that could no longer be denied. It had remodeled relationships, redefined boundaries, and questioned the assumptions that had long dictated the household. And as the days went by, the nagging question hung in the air: would the Brown family be able to bounce back from the revelations? Or had Christine's bravery altered their narrative for good? One thing was true: the story had been altered, and the family's path would never be the same again as it had been during the peaceful balance of the past. The drama at the Brown household was at its boiling point. Every conversation, every look was laced with Christine's revelations. Kody, who was once above reproach in his dominance of the family story, now found himself charting new waters, compelled to confront not only the public glare, but a realignment of the dynamics upon which he had so long relied. Pride, frustration, and vulnerability crashed together in ways that could not be hidden, leaving a soft but palpable tension hanging in every room of the house. Christine, on the other hand, moved with quiet purpose that contrasted with Kody's chaos. Her bravery, telling her own story, had brought her an unlooked-for authority, a presence that could not be denied or overlooked. Every public reaction, every encounter, reaffirmed the force of her voice, setting her intensity against Kody's increasing inability to keep his own composure. What started out as a private act of expression had evolved into a powerful statement regarding agency, resilience, and the importance of being heard. Within the household, the aftermath was complicated. The other wives walked a fine line of empathy, curiosity, and self-protection, and the children watched the subtle shifts, knowing the unspoken tensions now governing their home. Routine tasks had added significance, and spaces once familiar were filled with unexpected meaning. The home had been forever changed, not by one occasion, but by the collective force of verities at last laid bare. And if you believed the story was over, the truth was much more complicated. Christine's truths had not only broken down Kody's facade, but had compelled each of them to examine their own roles, allegiances, and assumptions. The balance of the past was lost, replaced by a new world where courage, integrity, and confrontation had realigned power and opened the door to reflection and change. In the still moments, when the public spotlight dimmed, and the home subsided into the fraught quiet between tempests, one question lingered, heavy and unanswered. Could the Brown family ride this new world without shattering entirely? Or had Christine's act of bold truth-telling forever transformed their narrative? The response was unclear, a tension left purposely loose, to prompt reflection, speculation, and discussion. What was certain was that Christine had taken her voice. Kody had been pushed to the limit as never before, and the family had reached a chapter of no return from which they could not go back to the known. And now, as the revelation dust continued to settle, the ultimate question waited for all to ponder: what next when the truth finally dawns, and how far can a family stretch before it snaps? Even as the initial shock of Christine's book started to subside, the ripple effects persisted like an insistent holdover tension within the Brown household. Each thing she had said had left its mark, an imprint that could not be so readily erased or dismissed. Kody's battle with pride and perception remained, quiet but relentless, as he walked both the internal fallout and the incessant public attention. The balance of power he had long counted on had tipped, and all his actions now seemed measured against the context of the truths Christine had shared. Christine herself traveled with the certainty that her narrative had forever altered the family. Every interview she gave, every fan encounter, and even personal moments in her own life reaffirmed the clarity of her voice. For the first time in years, she wasn't just heard but also seen, her own point of view respected in a manner that moved beyond appearance or performance. Expressing her truth had changed her, letting her exude a confidence that permeated every exchange, both within and outside the house. In the home, the other wives were finding a new normal. Loyalties were strained, emotions shifted, and the mundane tasks of life now weighed with significance. Words were spoken slowly, eyes were charged with meaning, and the children, sensitive and curious, felt the underlying tension that characterized this new dynamic. Even the mundane routines, a shared dinner, a day at home, a casual discussion,
felt charged as if everything had been rewritten by the truths that had reshaped their reality. And if you believed that drama was over, the changing emotional stakes had another thing to say. Kody's internal conflict with his own identity and control continued. But Christine's newfound assertiveness imposed a new dynamic of power that no longer could be denied by the family. The public, still enamored, continued to pick apart, analyze and comment on the events as they were happening, maintaining the pressure in ways both unavoidable and irrevocable. In still moments of contemplation, the gravity of what had occurred came into focus. Christine had not merely spoken her truth, she had rewritten the story whole, challenging perceptions, pushing boundaries, and remapping the family dynamic in ways that could never be undone. Each person in the household was now confronted with the question of accommodation. Could they ride this new terrain in accommodation, understanding, and unity? Or had the secrets irreparably altered the trajectory of their lives? And in that lingering ambiguity, one question remained, haunting in the quiet between conversations, between acts, and between hearts. When truth presents itself in its most unadulterated form, how do families survive, rebuild, and recreate themselves? The tale was hardly finished, and its consequences would resonate through the Brown family years after the book had been devoured, and the news had faded. Time passed differently in the Brown family. Once Christine's book had whipped up the tempest. Nights blended into days, and each instant was heavy with what had been uncovered. Kody's ego, once solid and authoritative, faltered under the constant duress of public criticism and internal strain. Each choice he made, each action he took, was now judged by the fact that the story he had so long dictated no longer exclusively belonged to him. Christine, on the other hand, arrived at a place of inner strength. Courage in sharing her story had granted her more than exposure. It had granted her freedom. She walked with purpose, her voice not simply heard in interviews and public appearances, but evident also in the quiet manner in which she moved through the house. For the first time, she felt visible, acknowledged, and unquestionably present. Her viewpoint, so long repressed, now bore the burden of truth, rearranging the dynamic of the family in ways as great as they were inexorable. The other wives observed and adjusted, each coming to terms in her own manner. Some discovered respect for Christine's courage, while others struggled with the doubt of a household changed. The kids, sensitive as ever, felt the shift in rhythm, the unseen currents of tension and empowerment that now flowed through everyday life. Mundane rituals, a common meal, a private conversation, even a look across the room, carried new weight, reminders that things would never again be as they had been. And if you believed the tale had ended, the truth was much more complicated. The struggle of Kody continued, imperceptible but unyielding, as Christine's strength continued to redefine the equation of power among family members. The public, enthralled as ever, tracked every turn of events, analyzing every detail of the Brown family. The ripple that Christine's disclosures caused spread far beyond the cover of her book, changing perceptions, relationships, and expectations in directions no one could fully anticipate. In those silent moments of introspection, one thing became perfectly clear, that speaking her truth had transformed everything. Christine had claimed her voice back, pushed back against assumptions, and altered the trajectory of a family story long dictated by someone else. Yet, the ultimate question remained unresolved, lingering like a shadow over every interaction, every choice, every future decision. How would the Brown family navigate the aftermath? And what would remain of their bonds, once the dust of revelation finally settled? The response was unknown, the suspense unresolved, and the tale full of betrayal, bravery, and change left open, awaiting the family and the world to see what was to follow. And as the silence lingered, one question reverberated in the minds of all who watched. When the truth is finally revealed, who makes it through it, and who is forever altered?